Welcome to the Athlete Climate Academy, where we speak to athletes, scientists, and communicators about the important conversations that we need to have about the climate crisis. We've got such a good guest for you today. Anna Pitman is the CSR Manager at Montane, who are a renowned UK-based outdoor clothing company making great gear since 1993 in the northeast of England, and who've been a Fairway Foundation member since 2019. Anna now leads the sustainability team to make sure they're on the right track. Anna, welcome to the podcast.
Hi Hughes, great to be here, thank you.
So many of our listeners will have, they buy the outdoor clothing from different places. They are loyal to different brands. Many of them will be Montane loyal to Montane. So tell us a little bit about Montane for the people who might not have heard of it before.
So like you said, we're an outdoors wear brand based in the northeast of England. We've been around for 30 years now, and we specialise in making technical outdoor product for outdoor activities like hiking, climbing, trail running. So we offer kit for men and women. We don't do children's wear, but we do accessories and backpacks as well as garments.
Nice. And when did you come over to the brand?
I've been with Montane for nearly 10 years now. So I started out in the design team working on the women's product. And then I moved over to CSR a few years ago because that was a kind of growing area of importance. So the business developed my role and subsequent roles.
And I suppose your background of design would really help in knowing for the corporate social responsibility, knowing where the products come from and where they're ending up.
Yeah, I think it was a helpful starting point. My background was in fashion design. And then I did a master's in sustainability and environmental management. But having worked at the brand for so many years, I guess I had a good grasp on our supply chain, who we were working with and the materials that we were using, as well as how we make the products and how we kind of go through that whole process with the teams. So yeah, I think it has been good grounding to understand that first.
And when you first came over, was the CSR role, sustainability role, created from nowhere, or were you moving into someone else's role? How did that work?
It was created from nowhere. I guess we were a very small brand when I joined. We're still a relatively small brand now. We didn't have anybody managing that area of the business. It was something that I'd been kind of managing for a few years on the side of design, mainly in relation to the products. But we were getting more and more questions from consumers and from retailers. And obviously there's now more and more legislation coming together off the back of the EU Green Deal, looking at what businesses are expected to do and how we should be communicating. So the role was created 3 years ago now. Yeah.
Yeah, and I bet in that short time, you've already seen it change massively. It seems, especially in the outdoor industry, that the way the seriousness of climate solutions and circular economy and sustainability is just changing so rapidly. It must be hard to keep up with sometimes.
Yeah, it's a really broad spectrum of topics that come up, which keeps it really interesting. And that's the nice side of it. There's always something to learn. There's always new things to focus on. But yeah, I guess for us being relatively small still, we've been really looking at where do we start with that? What can we feasibly do with the team that we've got? And then where do we go next?
I really love, I talk about different countries around the world, and I'm from Wales, and we're a small country that can adapt quite quickly and put initiatives into place that bigger countries might not be able to do. So I'm a real believer in like what small countries and small brands can actually do where the bigger brands can't. So how have you taken up to having, you were a smaller brand back then, it's still a fairly small brand, but a really well-known brand as well. What are some of give us a broad overview of some of the initiatives you've started to put into place, some of the foundations you've had to put into place to make sure that Montane are as responsible as possible?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting balance because small brands do have that flexibility to kind of get involved with things and make those differences. And you've also got less people internally to engage and try and make that part of everybody's day-to-day working. But also smaller businesses have less leverage with factories. We have less resource and budget for signing up to different certifications. So there is a kind of balance between the amount that small brands can achieve. And I guess there's also that thing about it would be nice to do everything at once and just, you want to address everything because it's all important and it's all interesting. But we also have to be realistic about it and take it kind of a bit at a time. So I guess for us over the past few years, the kind of focus areas have really been obviously our products. So we've been looking at the materials that we source, the packaging that we use, and the supply chain. So you mentioned that we're a Fair Wear member. How do we continue that membership and work closely with our manufacturers? So we've been looking at things like having more standards in place for the materials that we use. So where we're using recycled fabric, making sure that it's got a third-party accreditation like the Global Recycling Standard. Where we're using down, making sure it's also got that verification. So we use the Responsible Down Standard. So all of things like that across recycled down, leather, cotton, making sure there's a certification there so that ultimately we want to be increasing the level of transparency with our consumers and trying to explain to them the complexities of garment supply chains and the actual products that they're buying from us so that they can understand what goes into them, how they're made. And yeah, we can be confident in the product claims that we make because we've got those third-party accreditations in place.
And how do you guys go about, like you say, it is complex. Making jackets is complex, but making apparel, backpacks, that kind of stuff is even more complex. What are some of the initiatives you started putting into place? Give us an example of like a program, if you have one, of, something that you wanted to do to increase that transparency with the public.
So in terms of that, we have an initiative that you can find on our website, and we also communicate it through our retailers and distributors, that's called Know What You're Buying. And really that's about consumers knowing what they're buying, understanding the product. So it's a kind of table or a list of information for the products that we sell that tells you where it was made, what the DWR is that's been applied, so whether it's a PFC-free or a C6 DWR. And then it goes through the different key materials and whether they're recycled and what third-party accreditations they've got. And it just means that consumers can see whether it's got, Blue Sign approved fabric, whether the down has come through a traceable supply chain. It helps them to understand those complexities. And whilst we were pulling that information together, we also developed a glossary of terms, which is also on our website. And that explains what those different terms mean, because we realised that that's where there's going to need to be a huge shift in the next few years as all of this kind of standards and legislation comes in for brands. Consumers really need to understand what they're buying. And when we talk about something being Blue Sign approved or PFC free, that doesn't mean anything to a lot of people. So that consumer education side of it is a really big part of it.
And when putting all that information together, how many years did you and your team age by trawling through all that data and all those, all the complexities of it? I imagine it was not an easy task.
No, and it's an ongoing task. So yeah, it's definitely not a quick win. But it's something that we feel is really important and we want to roll it out to being available on all of our products. So we launched the initiative for winter 23 and it was a kind of transition step on from something we'd launched the previous winter, which was called More Sustainable Choice. And we've moved away from More Sustainable Choice really because we realised that more and more of our products were qualifying for that kind of branding. And the question was really, well, what makes them more sustainable? Because more than half the range had qualified. We realised that actually what we wanted to do was just communicate that information on everything. So we transitioned it into Know What You're Buying, and that's on about 40% of the range now, with the aim of it being on everything by winter 25.
And on that note of transparency, and I'm always pushing for, whenever someone asks me, what should outdoor brands be doing more of? I always tell them, ask for a social impact report or like just an impact report in general, from climate, from social, from everything else. Yours has come out a couple months ago. Give us a brief overview of your latest impact report and what were some of the big wins and some places you want to do better on.
Yeah, well, so at the moment, the one that we publish is our social impact report. So that really focuses on our work with the Fair Wear Foundation, and our like responsible supply chains. And then what we're working on at the moment is a broader impact report, which encompasses everything, so the sustainability, environmental side of it as well. And that's due to be published in January. Um, so looking at those things has been a really good way of engaging different teams from across the business and seeing what are we doing now, where are the gaps, what would we want to do next, and what do we need to make that happen. Um, so yeah, it's been a good way of gauging the progress that we've made already and the things that we want to achieve next.
It really feels like, impact reports in general, but climate impact reports, circular economies, and the likes, that and then social impact reports, they seem like they're different, but like they're so tied together in all the things that happen. It's really nice to see that you're going to pull that together into one big one, because it feels like you can't have one thing without the other thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. And that's definitely where we started with it. When I moved into this role, I was managing social and environmental like topics across the business. But the social side of it, once you get into it, it's very time consuming. So we now have somebody else who works full time managing that, because that's really looking at factory conditions, social compliance in the factories, and the audits and everything that comes off the back of that. And that just takes a lot of work and collaboration with the factories. So we have someone managing that, and she pulls a report together every year. That's the one that's published on our website. And that's what's used by Fairwear. They do an annual audit of us to make sure that what we say we're doing is what they expect us to be doing, and that we're meeting the standards that they put in place. And then, yeah, separately to that, the impact report will just be much broader and should be a nice way of pulling it all together, because we have often been asked, can we get all of that information from one place? And at the moment, it doesn't really exist in one place, unless you read lots of different bits on the website. But yeah, it'd be nice to just have it all in one neat report.
Yeah, it would. And those links, then you can start to see as a consumer between, how many factories does Montane have? So where is our stuff being produced? But not only is it being produced in a way that I think is as low impact as possible, but also as fair as possible and as just as possible. What
Yeah.
kind of when looking back through those supply chains, have you come across anything that you found really interesting? Have you come across anything that you found too complex and you're gonna have to kind of kick down the road for future? Because supply chain, looking at supply chains, I've got a few friends who do it like, and that's their whole job, is a really complicated process. And I often think that, especially huge brands, they can't know where all this stuff comes from. But I'm hoping brands like Montane and a few of the smaller ones can actually say, this factory produces this amount of stuff, this factory produces this amount of stuff. Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, pretty much. So, something that our design team has been working on over the past couple of seasons has been this concept that they've called timeless design. And that's really about product durability and aesthetic durability. So, obviously, we want the products to be high performance and have high durability in terms of how long they're going to last. But we also want them to have aesthetic durability and to not date and people not want to replace them because the aesthetic isn't in with the latest trend. So moving towards this kind of timeless way of designing things has both changed the aesthetic of our products quite dramatically, but also means that we've been able to focus on reducing the range of materials that goes into a product. Because the products are technical, there's quite a lot of different materials that go into them. So although you obviously see the outside fabric and maybe a line of fabric, there's lots of other small areas, like facings around the hem and the hood, for example, that use a different fabric. So they've really been looking at how can we minimize the range of materials going into a product, and then ultimately that means that there's a smaller range of materials being shipped from the fabric supplier to the manufacturer. So it just streamlines things and gives us more clarity over what's going into a product and where it's coming from, and also less things to focus on so that we can make sure that the materials we are still using have got those third-party certifications.
And those materials that you've started using now, you get to the design team. Have you started to change the way that you design the products, different innovations that allow you to use less fabric or maybe some recycled fabric, but some virgin fabrics? What are some of the design solutions that you've started to implement to help you on this journey?
Yeah, that's definitely something they've been looking at. So products that we've maybe had in the range a long time where they're looking to redevelop them, they've been getting into the detail and seeing, how can we reduce the weight of that? How can we make it more easily repairable? We want to ultimately make our products as durable as possible all round. And the idea behind that product and aesthetic durability was to create emotional durability of the product so people really feel attached to it. They can make memories with it for years to come. So yeah, that's been a huge focus for them. And then that's supported by things like our repair service. So we launched that 5 years ago now, but we've expanded it in this year out to Germany and Austria as well, and also relaunched it on the website just so it's easier to use. And that's, yeah, again, to support people in keeping those products going for as long as possible.
I hope that you said you expanded it. I hope you expanded the team. The video I watched from your repair center was it Claire? Was it Rachel? There's one
Repair
person.
Claire.
She was like, yeah, repair Claire. She was like, I'm the person who does all the repairing. And I was like, I hope you've got support now, because with this uptick in people wanting and almost wearing it as a badge of privilege when you've got a different,
Mhm.
when you got a patch on it or you've got a different type of baffling or whatever, different color on the, people are starting to think of it as a badge of honor that you have looked after your gear, sent it back for repair service, and brought it back out.
Yeah.
Just thinking about and worrying about Claire a bit. Has she got some support yet?
She does have an extra person now. Yep. Yep. There's an extra
Yeah.
Claire.
And are they flat out? Are people taking you up on the offer of a repair service and wanting this stuff repaired?
Yeah, I think they're busy because they have a range of things that comes through to them. So they get the customer repairs that people have obviously sent through with a specific thing to be repaired. And then we get other things, returns for minor faults where they might need something small repairing. And we have an outlet shop that's located next to our head office. So those items then go into that shop and are sold there. And then they also work with the design team on looking at product repairability and making sure that the designs are things that they're actually able to fix.
Yeah, because not all things are able to be fixed. Sometimes a jacket or a pair of trousers has to come to the end of its life. How does Montaigne think
Mm.
about end of life of products? Because quite famously, we don't really have a good way of doing that yet. We don't have a good use case for end of life. How does Montaigne think about it?
I think it's a really complex topic, and at the moment, there's limited solutions that are actually effective and kind of scaled up. So I think things like from when you buy the products, having the aftercare information available on our website is obviously there to help people to look after the product in the right way and keep it going for as long as possible. And then once you've had it for a certain period of time, having things like the repair service is really important. So yeah, I think those things are really helpful. But ultimately, product disposal and circular economy and what do you do with those products when they really have reached their end of life is a global challenge, really. And I just don't think at the moment there's a scaled up system in place, particularly not in the UK, for products to go to that's really, turning them back into garments, which is what we ultimately want.
Yeah, I'm seeing loads of like Instagram posts or some Instagram posts about these new machines that you can put a sweater into and it turns it back into yarn and you can use that again. But I would imagine that those are single fabric garments and not a multi-fabric garment that would
Mm.
just be much more difficult to do that with.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. People see those videos and that publicity and think it's great, and it is great, but it's really limited. And the thing that comes with that is this push towards monomaterials and making products that only use one type of yarn or one type of material. And actually, that's really difficult to achieve, particularly in outdoors wear, because we might have elastane thrown in so that something's got stretch, or it might have nylon in there for added durability, and then you've obviously got all of the trims. So yeah, getting a product through to its end of life really needs a system in place for product disassembly, separating out so that you know which materials or which items of the garment are made of what materials, having machinery that can recycle them, and then blended yarns is just yeah a headache at the moment for all of that machinery that can recycle. There was one I saw the other day that sounded very impressive, but they could manage a blended fibre, but only up to 5% elastane. If there was any more elastane than that or any other kind of yarn in there, it couldn't handle it. So yeah, it's great if you've got 100% cotton t-shirt or something like that, but for most products, it's the solution's just not there yet.
And for all outdoor companies, I suppose it's always more difficult than just fashion, because if you're wearing a shirt down the high street, it's different to wearing a jacket in the high Alps or something, where the technical aspect starts to get in. How do you guys think about that weight of, well, it needs to be as low impact as possible, but also it needs to be technical as possible? Are you like, I would hope the rest of them that say technical comes first, it has to be safe, it has to be durable, and then we'll do as much as we can to lower that impact later.
Yeah, that's definitely the approach that we take. Because I think a lot of the time people say, well, when is your whole range going to just use recycled materials? And that's not really what we're aiming for. We're aiming to look at things on a case by case basis and see where can we make changes that will lower the impact, but also maintain that product performance, and achieving that product durability. So we have items in the range that have moved over to recycled, and that's great where it's possible. There's obviously a lot, like a long period of product testing that goes on in the background before we can launch those products. But we also have products where it's not possible to make that switch. We've done product testing, we've trialed it, and the recycled version just maybe isn't as durable. So whether that's going to develop and there might be more options available in the future is something that we'll keep an eye on. But yeah, there are challenges that come with moving to new technologies. So even things like PFC-free DWRs, they throw up challenges. So it's not a quick win.
On that case of PFC free DWRs, what's the current Montane outlook on going DWR free for that kind of stuff for your clothing?
Yeah, it's something that we started a few years ago, and where we can do it and it doesn't impact product performance, we have switched to PFC-free DWRs. So
Nice.
we've done it across the legwear and the down and synthetic. Waterproofs is the challenge because obviously that's where it's more critical, and particularly where you've got those high performance pieces that are going to be used in more challenging environments. But our goal at the moment is to be completely PFC free across both DWRs and membranes by winter 26 at the latest. And
Wow.
largely that's being led by the legislation and the changes from key manufacturers like Gore-Tex, who are changing their technologies to be falling in line with that legislation. But we've got our first products launching in February. So for our spring summer 24 range, first products that will be completely PFC free, waterproof products, sorry. So that's a waterproof jacket and pant where both the membrane and the DW are PFC free. So I think that will be a really
Wow.
interesting test of interest from consumers and whether people understand it's not just about the change from us, it's about a change in consumer behaviour so that people understand how they need to care for those products differently.
Yeah, because even I saw another. I think I look at too much social media. Social media. I was looking at Instagram the other day, and there was a reel from someone out in, I think, Canada, might have been in the upper Midwest, talking about how their jacket was waterproof or sold as waterproof, but it was soaked through and this and that, and how she was very upset because it wasn't completely waterproof. And I think there's still lots to talk about when it comes to water resistance, waterproofness, how to re-waterproof your jacket and things like that. I know someone we both know recently said that they've only just re-waterproofed a jacket that they had for like 10 years or something. Um,
Mm.
so I suppose education and how we go about teaching people how to look after their gear is a really easy
Yeah,
win, fairly straightforward, and something we should be doing more of.
yeah, yeah, 100%. That whole educational piece for consumers is so important Because while I understand people do feel that brands have a responsibility to make all the changes and just sell products that are lower impact, consumers need to understand that if you change what's in a product, that does change how you need to care for it and how that product performs. So, yeah, things like reproofing and where do you start and what do you use is definitely something that we need to be educating people about.
Absolutely. So looking ahead, whether it's PFC-free stuff, circular economy, lowering our impact, what are the things, your kind of aspirations and goals, whether that's for Montane or yourself or for the outdoor industry in general? What are your goals going forward and your aspirations for a better like outdoor gear industry? Just a small question to finish with.
Yeah, I think for Montaigne, this really centers around one of our internal values, which is to think long term, and that's something both within the business and outside the business. I'd hope that people embrace thinking just more day to day. How do those things impact our decisions? So from a consumer's perspective, really thinking, do I need to buy this product? If you're going somewhere, do you need to travel there the way that you were thinking, or could you do it in a lower impact way, maybe using public transport? So it's all those little things that kind of add up to making a difference. But yeah, just thinking, how can I do this with less impact to ultimately make something last longer, have less effect? I think that's just a change in mindsets for everybody. And it's not just for sustainability professionals or eco warriors, it's for everybody to really start having that integrated into their day to day.
And for you as a design professional, as a CSR manager, how would you want, you say it's been what you do at Montaigne and what I suppose other outdoor brands are doing is being pushed by legislation. Some of them are kind of taking it on their own backs to make big changes. Obviously, the really big brands, like you say, can push factories to change and implement different things as well. So from yourself as a design professional, now a CSR professional, how would you like to see the outdoor industry change over the next 10, 20 years to become much lower impact?
I think there probably just needs to be, from the industry's perspective, more collaboration and more openness and just more willingness to do that, to make those changes. Because ultimately we can have a bigger impact if we all do things together and we all work towards the same kind of goals. But I guess setting those goals and what do you decide to work on first and how do you go about doing it, a lot of that does need to be guided, and I think that comes from the legislation, and that's definitely coming, but at the moment it's all still TBC, and that's quite frustrating because you're waiting for the guidelines and everybody's saying, well, how do I do this and what should I do about this? And yeah, we're waiting for the legislation and then how that reflects for the UK, or for other markets around the world, because there's not very good alignment at the moment where there is legislation coming in. There's a lot of conflict between, say, the EU versus America, or even just the EU as an umbrella versus individual EU countries. So yeah, I think there needs to be better alignment, more clarity, and then at least people know what they're trying to achieve and work towards.
And is that something that we can go down up on rather than top down, where brands push for the legislation from the bottom end to get that through quicker?
To an extent, I think people do have a voice. I guess the fact that they're working on it already is really positive. That it is coming. There's a challenge, I think, because the people making the legislation don't work in the industry. And that's where the conflict is coming from. Somebody will introduce something and not really realize either that it conflicts with something else or the complexity behind that, and say, we're going to bring in this really progressive, great idea next year, and actually not realize that it will take brands a couple of years to work on that. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see where it all gets to, but I think a lot of it will also have a grace period for brands once the legislation has been finalised. That grace period should give people the time to react and change their ways of working by a certain future date, hopefully.
Well, it's really nice that brands like yours are working on this with those legislators and saying we want this sooner rather than later, and making sure that what I'm always looking for on top of an impact report from a brand is transparency, but also a way of that brand communicating with the public that buy their products, and doing stuff like this, having these kind of conversations, and putting climate solutions in their minds, at the front of their minds rather than at the back. It speaks volumes, and I'm really glad that Montane are doing that. Anna, thank you so much for the conversation. Anna Pitman is CSR Manager over at Montane. Anna, thank you very much for being on the Athlete Climate Academy podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been great.